Today. Didn't he do a great job, folks? Thank you for that. Well, last year, I was going back and looking at prior notes and things that I did last year, and I noticed that the sermon last year was titled 2024, A Year of Generosity. And that kind of threw me off a little bit of exactly where I thought God was going to be taking me. But looking at this passage, looking at this past year, and I began to kind of survey a little bit of what God was doing and what God had done in 2024. And I put in your notes that you have this morning the last thing that I said in my notes the first Sunday of 2024. And I said, let's ensure that 2024 is a year of generosity as we sow seeds for God's kingdom as individuals and as a church. That includes how we share our material resources, but more importantly, how we spread the gospel with those that need it. And so I looked back, and that was, I think, January the 7th of last year. It's January the 5th of this year. And so we can look back in retrospect and see, and maybe you've done that in your life, to look back to see all those New Year's resolutions where you said, I'm going to do this or do that, and you look back, and most of the time we look back and we haven't done everything that we said we wanted to do. That's not really been the case for us collectively as a church, though, because looking back, a year of generosity was what 2024, I believe, was for our church. And I've given you just a few things in your notes to give you an idea of how I think that was completed. I say after this list, I believe I wrote, this is not an exhaustive list of everything this church has done. So if you're sitting here today and a spirit rises up in you that I didn't list something that you led or were a part of, maybe you need to check your heart, number one. All right. But I'm telling you at the outset, this is not a list of everything that individual ministries did. These were special things that we kind of did over and above. Looked at the numbers because Ken so graciously provided me the financial report, I think, on yesterday, and I was able to look at the whole year. Over $13,000 in benevolence funds helping people last year. And some people question why we needed as much as we put in the budget for this year, because we were able to help a lot of people. And we don't help people to the tune of $5,000 a piece, so that's not one or two people. So there was a lot of people that were impacted and being able to help folks in that way. We made 55, and I'm calling it care packages, Brenda, because it wasn't just blankets. We handmade 55. Did we hand make those blankets? Yes, we did. We cut them and tied them and all of that. But we have a generous person that funds the fleece for us in the church and provided for all of these bolts. Several years ago, I learned what a bolt, outside of what I knew a bolt was, which is something that you fasten things with, but I've learned now, I'm cultured, a bolt of fabric. It's a big, huge thing about this big, delivered to my house. But 55 blankets we were able to make this year with that fleece, and then through the Sunday school efforts and what you all did with your class and putting, we had Bibles from the Bible ministry that were put in there, and also there were gloves and hats, and a trash bag, I think, in there, and all of that to be able to help the homeless and people that were going to be in need. And certainly with that weather out there right now, they have been in the hands of folks out there and been put to good use. As we've said, repeatedly over the past couple of months, over 521 Operation Christmas Child boxes were made. That's 521 kids that are starting like right now, and maybe a little bit last month, are receiving those boxes. 521 kids, 5 times the amount of people that we have sitting in the room right now, were able to impact those children. And looking just at the money, we spent now $13,350.62 to buy the items for those things and some of the bulk things we had, but the shipping of that $10 per box. And that's not including, like this month for washcloths, how much people donated items, soap and things of that nature. Quite a lot of money was spent for those boxes. We sent a team of 16 people to Alaska in July. And collectively with our Alaska mission trip, with different mission projects and different mission organizations that we supported Israel and a church in Jerusalem there, a missionary that's on the ground in Israel. We support the Gideons. We support several different missionaries and people around. Over $55,367 was invested in missions from this church last year, in addition to all the other things that we've had going on. $2,000 is what I can figure we bought Bibles, and I'm looking at the numbers of Bibles that I have purchased by the case and that have left the table out there, and we set up shop at Shoppers Value and handed out Bibles, which we do that at least once a year. But Philip's talking to me about let's do it twice a year, maybe. But we gave out over 750 Bibles ourselves. With people taking them off the table out there and giving boxes. We sent 88 or more with y'all to Ecuador. I've given boxes of Bibles. I mean, all the things that we've done where the ladies ministry gave out Bibles, we have these cases of Bibles that have been prepared. And so for various different ways and different things that people have done, and also people just take Bibles off the table and hand them out personally. Unfortunately, I think there was a time that somebody who's here today, I won't mention his name, but he had some roofers doing work on his house and wanted some Spanish Bibles, and I just was out of them. I couldn't believe it, and we tried not to be out of them, but people think about those things and say, listen, let's give these Bibles out to people, and so lots of Bibles, and that's in addition to all the things how we support the Gideons and what they do. So again, there were many different things that I could stand here and say, and I'm not trying to give attaboys to all the stuff that we have done, but I am saying that when we set out last year to say that would be a year of generosity, I'm not saying we were perfect, because I'm sure there were missed opportunities. But I'm saying I think that we can hold our head up and say, you know what, we did our best to fulfill that commitment. And I thank you all for what you do in this church, because we're not a mega church, but we do have some mega people that are here that have a heart to serve the Lord and do things, and it's not possible without you all coming together. So I thank you so much for what y'all have done and the impact that you've made on the community here, around the world. And again, nothing to me tops the Christmas Child boxes for the simple reason. Even me going to Alaska and the connections we made, which is probably one of the second things there. But those 521 kids that are so excited to get a shoebox full of soap and washcloths and a couple of toys and all of that, and the impact that that'll make on those kids' lives for the future is huge. So thank you for what you've done, and again, thankful for what the individual ministries have been doing. I do want to say that I appreciate the 8 or 9 of us that are involved in the mentoring. And I'll mention maybe something about this here a little bit later, but there have been 8 or 9 of us that have given an hour a week for the school year for this past year, and still doing it now, to go and mentor at SOAR Academy in Weaver here, and God has been blessing that, and I'll tell you in a little bit maybe how things have come together where that God showed me something the other day. But this morning, we want to kick off 2025 with the message entitled A Year of Preparation. And this may hit your mind a little different than where we're actually going to go with it. But if you look at the definition of preparation in Webster's dictionary, it says the action or process of making something ready for use or service, or of getting ready for some occasion, a test or duty, a state of being prepared. All right. So let's take a look at Matthew chapter 25, first 13 verses. Pretty familiar passage of scripture, I'm sure, for most folks. It says, at that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish one said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." I had to admit something to you. With all the things that's been going on, and I haven't taught Sunday school, I teach our young adults Sunday school class. I didn't read the Sunday school lesson until 2 o'clock this morning. And I read the Sunday school lesson, and I said, "Good heavens! What a wonderful preparation for what I already just, finished writing and putting in not finished writing, but putting the sermon notes." I had to make sure, even if I fall asleep in my chair, that I put those sermon notes in the app, no matter what. So I woke up and I fell asleep, and I woke up and I said, Pat Allred, she will read the notes for the sermon at 2 a.m. So before I went to bed, I said, I'm going to type these notes in the app because I have to get that put in there in a special way. And I was about to go to bed, and it hit me. I said, my goodness, I hadn't read the Sunday school lesson. So I read it, and I said, how wonderful this is. Because we're in Matthew 24, talking about Jesus coming. And that is the context by which he's writing this, and the backdrop for what Matthew's writing as Jesus is telling the parable here in Matthew 25. But throughout the Bible, we see time and time again how God has this expectation of us to be prepared, us to be ready, us to be watchful and vigilant. I mean, you see that across the board in the Bible. In Proverbs 21 and verse 5, it says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty." Let that sink in for a minute. The plans of the diligent. So if you're being diligent, what are you doing? You're taking a look at it. You're taking great care. And what's happening? You're probably being prepared. Those things. And what is a proverb? It's just a universal truth. All right? And it's just universally true that people that are more diligent, more prepared, more watchful about how things are going are probably going to fare better than folks that just go by haste. And certainly I spent 15 years in banking, and I can tell you, if you manage your money that way, you're broke. And a lot of you are figuring out, well, if I can just make it to tax time to pay off the credit cards that we just spent for Christmas. Nuts. Anyway, I didn't preach that this year, so I'm going to move on, okay? All right. With this, the women in the parable show us a vivid image. Of the importance of being prepared and ready. Do not read too much, as you should not, into parables. There is not a percentage thing here, 50%. It's just showing you there are two classes, all right? Two people, some that were prepared, some that were not. But there were 10 women, and they were going to be a part of this wedding procession that was going to take place. It's hard for us to get the context of all this because we don't do weddings this way. But this would have happened at night. So they come. They all brought their lamps. Now, I don't know exactly what the lamp was, torch, lamp, or whatever, but I brought today this oil lamp that I got when I was in Israel. We actually got this one for free. I believe in Bethlehem or the Church of the Nativity. I can't remember where we were. But this is an oil lamp that they, similar to what they would use and what we found in archaeology. They'd have the oil in there. You have your wick, this here, and they would light that, and they would have this lamp. Maybe it was larger. They had lamps of all different kinds. Now, again, don't go and say they had this exact one that I'm holding in my hand. I'm giving you an example of what they had. It certainly was not a kerosene lantern or a Coleman, or any of those things that we may have today, but they needed oil. They needed the wick here. They needed all of that to be able to light. So they went out because this occurred at nighttime. The bridegroom would be on the way. So they all went out. They all had lamps. They all had oil in their lamps, and they all had wicks in their lamps. What was the difference between the foolish 5 and the wise 5? Huh? The wise had extra oil, Okay, all of them were burning. You'll see that. It wasn't that they were so crazy that they walked out with an empty lamp. Okay, they had oil, but the other 5 said, you know what, I'm going to prepare a little bit because we don't exactly know what's going to happen. And what does it say happened? The bridegroom was a long time coming, as sometimes men are. They're late. So they were all sitting around. Now, people make a lot that they slept. They all went to sleep. It wasn't just the 5 foolish ones that slept. They all went to sleep. They were tired of waiting and sitting around, as you do in a sermon trying to get the pastor to land. You fall asleep. And then I pound the pulpit to wake you up. All right? But when they all got up, and they realized, hey, the bridegroom, he's going to be coming. Why do you trim the lamp? Why do you trim the wick? You don't want a charred one. You need to trim it and make sure it's all prepared. And the other said, man, we've been burning because they had their lights out there. It's been burning for a long time. We've used up all the oil that's in our lamp. We need some more. So the others got their jars of oil, poured it in there. The 5 that didn't bring it, they said, wait, can we borrow some of yours? Isn't that how unprepared people are? Want to mooch off the others. And they said, no. Then you say, well, the 5 wise ones, they were stingy. No. If they were saying, if we give you our oil, everybody's going to be in the dark. Okay? We don't have enough to put some in yours and have some in ours, so you need to go buy, some real quick, run down to the convenience store, get some, and run back. All right? So they left, and then the bridegroom arrives. These are like bridesmaids, if you will, okay? They were not the brides. So they enter in the wedding banquet, and then the other 5 show up, and they want to get let in. No, it's too late. 2 things didn't happen in this culture when you were doing these types of things. You were not ill-prepared by not having your lamp. Sometimes people would forget their lamp. You didn't get to walk in the procession without your lamp being lit. You're put out. If you were late, you're not going to come in and crash the party. All right? So they were left out of that. And of course, Jesus is talking about this in the sense of us being prepared for his return. All right? And that is something that you need to think. When I say a year of preparation, I am talking about your spiritual condition. Are you prepared for Jesus Christ to come right now, today? Okay, but I'm going to broaden that out, not just to that spiritual preparation on that, to take a look at just how we should be prepared in our daily lives when it comes to what God has for us to do. In 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15 and 16, really, but in verse 15 it says, but do this with, it says, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. Okay? And if you pay attention there, depending on what translation you read, it says always be prepared, always be ready, and it uses that always. Okay? Be prepared. Always be ready. Are you? What's it say to be prepared for? It's an open book test, folks. To give an answer of what? It says if somebody comes up to you and asks you the reason that you have hope, you should always be prepared to give an answer for that. Now, that word in the Greek is apologia, means to give a defense. We use that in apologetics. All right, so this verse has been beat down a lot about that. But listen, how could you sit here today and not be ready, not be prepared if somebody asks you, how do you have hope? Now, it's not saying that you have to always be prepared to talk to somebody about the hypostatic union. To talk about how really is there a Trinity, but the Son doesn't know the day or the hour? How did that donkey talk? Can you explain that? What about this virgin birth thing? Some of that, it may be a little difficult for you to get into some of those things. It didn't say that you always be prepared to defend everything that's in the Bible that way, but it did say you should be able to defend the reason you individually have hope. And if you can't do that today, I would almost say, I'm going to stop just short. I'm stopping about as short as I can. It's like right here. You may not have hope. Because if you have the hope, the peace of the gospel of Jesus Christ, if you have that, he has empowered you to tell somebody about that. He's changed your life. You know what it's like to have been lost, but now to be found. You know what it's like to have been out there doing it by yourself, struggling like that prodigal son when he was out there trying to make everything happen, and he's out there slopping those pigs, and he realized, you know what, back in my father's house, the servants are eating better than this. And he goes back to daddy, and going back there was so much better, and you know that you've had that journey back down that road to when the father embraced you and killed the fattened calf and put a cloak on you and a ring and said, this is my beloved son who once was lost but now is found. You know that, and you feel that, and you know the grace of God. You know the wrath of God. You know when he tore your tail up. I'm thankful that he's not one of these people that say, stand in the corner. He doesn't mind whipping. I'm too hard-headed for that. They just wait that time out. But Lord mercy, Billy Moyer, when he had that leather belt, he told me one day, he said, when you get home, we'll give you a whipping. So I thought, yeah, okay. You didn't have to wear seat belts back in them days. And I remember I was in the middle of that T-top Thunderbird you had. And I was just talking to him. He was just jovial, just talking to me like nothing was going on. I said, I got him to forget. We walked in the door of the house. He said, go to your room. I said, what you talking about? What do you mean? We was cool, man. Everything was great. Now, and tore my tail up. I would just hit the floor. And back in them days, you could lift me up with one hand. Try it now. Anyway, I'll show you. Anyway, but I say that because there are sometimes I stand up here and have to say that my childhood was less than perfect and I didn't have a lot of great leading in some things. But one thing I can say about my dad is that I now, after all these years, and then never a time did I see in his eyes a joy to whip me. Never did I think that he didn't have to holler and scream and do it out of anger, but I knew that I deserved everyone that I got, and I seen tears in his eyes. I remember as a little kid seeing tears in his eyes. And for me, and I hadn't had to do it too much, but for these three of mine, y'all know them, it's not a fun thing to have to discipline in any way, whether it's making them stand in the corner or making them right, or whether you have to really whack them around a little bit in that. But God does that because he loves us and he disciplines us. So you know what it's like to get a little discipline from God. And hopefully you appreciate what God has done for you in that disciplined way, because he's preparing you. He's getting you ready for what's going to come in the future. So you should have this way of saying, yes, let me tell you something. I've gone through that. Let me tell you why I have hope. I have hope because I surrendered to Jesus Christ. And I went through all of these things. I went through the trials. I went through the tribulations. Guess what? Still going through some trials and tribulations sometimes. But what I know is I know the end game. I know the end of the story. I know what God is going to do. I serve a God that can see the day of my birth and the day of my death at the exact same time. So I'm going to trust in him. And my whole stock is not placed just in this world, that I know that there's something greater than this world that I have in store for me, because there is no hope if this world is all you have. As best as you can get it. The best life you could possibly have. I know people sitting in this room right now and people all across this world that know that you may have security when you have a little bit of money, but there's only so much a dollar will buy. But when you have joy, hope, and peace, through the gospel of Jesus Christ, the message that those angels were telling those shepherds to go tell everybody, that the Savior is here, that here in this day, in the city of David, a Savior has been born to you. He saved us from all of these things, and we have hope, and we need to tell people about it. We need to be prepared. In Ephesians 6, 14 and 15, I read this the other day, and I said, wow, I not really paid much attention to this. I'm going to read verse 14. We're going to verse 15, though. Stand firm, then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with, you see that? What does it say? With the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Get prepared. Put on your boots, because you are going to walk in some uneven terrain, and you need to be ready and have this readiness for this gospel of peace that passes all understanding. When we put on that armor, every piece of that armor is preparing for battle. Right? The helmet, the breastplate, the belt of truth, the sword, the shield, all of those things. And with our boots, our feet that are fitted with the readiness that comes. The gospel is what carries you. That gospel message is what carries you through all of these things in life. It's what gives you that strength to walk through trials and tribulations. It's because you're not stepping on hot coals with your bare feet. It's the gospel of peace that speaks to you in your heart. And God expects us, folks, to be prepared. He expects us to have feet that are fitted with readiness. Whatever we're doing for the Lord, we should make sure that we're putting in the necessary work to be ready. And that's the piece that I'm talking about for our church specifically for 2025. God gave me something about 6 months ago that you're going to probably get sick of me saying, because I'm going to keep repeating it. He does not expect perfection, but he does expect preparation. There is no reason in whatever you're doing for God that you should do it haphazardly or in haste and not to be prepared for what you're doing. So in this church, it's been my mantra for the past 12 years to say to you, I have 2 rules when it comes to you serving in any capacity in this church. And these are my rules, but I think they come from the Bible. Number 1, that you are called of God to do whatever it is. You want to sweep the floor? You ought to be called to do it. There is no difference in a person serving the church. I have swept floors and scrubbed toilets and been the pastor. There's no hierarchy of value in this place. And if I'm saying that I'm too good to scrub the toilets, you ought to get rid of me. And so you ought to be called to do whatever it is that you're doing to serve the Lord. Cut the grass, do the shrubs, whatever it is that you're out here doing. You're called of God to do it. And number 2, you're willing to accept the call of what God is telling you to do. You remember Jonah? He was called to go to Nineveh. I mean, he went, Took a little detour. Get somebody to explain that. Are you prepared to explain that? Maybe not. All right, but you believe that it happened. But see, Jonah wasn't quite willing at first to go. But after he got spit out of that fish, he said, I think I'm going to go over there and preach to these Ninevites. And so you got to be called and you got to be willing. But listen, I'm asking you about stuff wherever you're serving. If you're up here and you're preaching, I'm not ill prepared to preach my sermon. I do not write it at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. I don't write it at 11th hour on Saturday night. I'm not just walking in here. I certainly don't use AI, write for me a sermon. I don't use canned stuff, take the notes, put them in Google, figure out if you can find. And if I did use canned stuff, I'd hope it'd be better than what I'm delivering to you. If you're up here and you're singing, and you're part of a music ministry, you ought to be prepared. You ought to put in the time and effort. If you're teaching the youth, you ought to just walk in. I'm not saying anybody in here is doing this, okay? Work with me. If you're doing that, you ought to be prepared. You ought to be ready. if you're driving the van, if you're teaching Sunday school, if you're doing ladies' ministry or men's ministry, or we're sending out cards, or Joe's getting up there to do something with the computer, or we're teaching in any other capacity, we're going to witness, and we're going up to the store up here to do some evangelistic stuff. Everything we ought to be doing, we ought to be serious enough about it to be prepared and ready and in the best possible position that God has got us in, because He is not a God of running by the seat of His pants. Think about where I took you in this past couple of months, really, as we look, and certainly in the end of December, when we were talking about that Christmas story, and how for millennia He'd been preparing that at this particular time in human history, Mary would be there, Joseph would be there, King Herod would be there, the wise men. All of this, he started that at least as far back as Genesis chapter 3, preparing for that. And He expects out of you in your individual life for you to be prepared when you serve Him. For us to be prepared when we're here, to be ready, and to be ready for when the time comes. You know, we're not just sitting around here just, winging it every single day. He's given us an instruction manual. He's given you gifts and talents and abilities in your life to work with. And he says, I've given you all the recipe. But some people, they take all of the recipe. You got everything, the baking powder, the flour, whatever you use to bake. I don't bake. Tell me, Pat, on what all that you need, sweetening condensed milk, I know is in everything that she made. You have all that. But guess what? You can have all the ingredients. Doesn't mean you can bake it, though. You got to follow the recipe. And if you follow somebody's good recipe to the T, generally, barring something electrical happening or the gas or something, it comes out right. But if you go, what's a pinch? Yeah. You just start doing this, and I go, why isn't this working right? You go, I was using salt instead of sugar. I mean, that really didn't happen, but that could be a problem. God's given us everything, and He's told us how to be prepared. We just sit back, and we get lazy. And we don't want to put in the time. We say, you know what? And folks, you're not going to see a backseat to me about this church attendance thing. I think church attendance is something you ought to do. I mean, I'm not saying if you don't do it, you're going to hell. I don't go quite that far. But some people say, you don't have to go to church to be saved. Well, I know that, dummy. But what's the case that you're making to not go to church? I mean, people say, I just can't really stand organized religion. Well, what you want, disorganized religion? I mean, what are you saying? Of course people are bad and all these other kind of things that we have, going on. I'm not, let's say that you're not going to get perfection out of me when I preach. You're not going to get that. That's not my expectation. But I hope what you don't get is me to not be prepared. For me to get up here and just try to throw something out on you, I think that wouldn't be serving the Lord right. And if you're not being prepared every day in your life, and some of you, and this is where I was going with this church attendance thing, I really get irritated, and I'm just letting y'all know this, and you'll keep doing it, doesn't matter. I get irritated when somebody tells me, well, I was so, I had so many things I was doing this weekend. I was just so tired. I think I'm not going to go to church Sunday morning. It irritates me. It always will. Because for me, this is just me. For me, I plan my things out going, I know I need to go to church. And so I better not do too much. Because see, I look at it the same way. When I went to work, there's a lot of times I went to work, I was dead dog tired. And you know what the bank didn't say? Well, Corey, we're so sorry. You work so much blowing your leaves at your house and doing all that, just don't show up today. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen on occasion. Obviously, there's times that you miss church, you're sick, and things that happen. Again, don't hear what I'm not saying, but do hear what I am saying. You get in a habit because you're not preparing. You're not looking for and saying, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I need to do. You're just winging it through life. Like they used to ask me, are you managing the bank or is the bank managing you? Are you managing life or is life managing you? And what happens is you start not just church attendance, but you start being of a lot of earthly good to your boss or your friends or your family, but no spiritual good to God. Because what Satan's going to do is keep throwing things at you. He's going to keep throwing smoke screens. He's going to keep putting projects, keep putting things out there that's going to bring you down emotionally, bring you down spiritually, going to bring you down physically. And you're going to say, God, I'm just too tired. I maybe can't say this because the people that sent this to me are sitting here today. Oh, Lord, am I supposed to say this? I'm talking out loud. I think I'm supposed to say it, but you'll be able to play this back and see that I didn't intend to do this. I listened to a sermon that I was sent not too long ago, and had a little issue, I guess, with the way the pastor presented about giving. Because really, and I won't get into all the details, and the people that are here that know what I'm about to talk about can talk to me about this later, but the pastor was basically presenting that if the people in the congregation had been encumbered by so much debt and so many financial obligations that they ought not worry about giving to God. Now, as a former banker, I said, well, that's nice. What I should then just do, rather than writing my check that I intend to write today to this church for tithing that I haven't yet done, I'm just going to go get that bass boat at Bass Pro Shop that I can guarantee you right now, the last I looked at the sticker, I give more to this church than what I can get that nitro for monthly. So by me going and getting that boat, that absolves me from my responsibility across the Bible to give. Just as a banker, that sounded kind of stupid. Just raise up all this debt, and that encourages you not to do that. I understand the point the pastor was trying to make, because churches ought not try to suck the blood life out of people and tell people that you ought to give every dollar that you give, and burdening widows and all these kinds of things. But let me tell you something. What you're never going to hear from me, I don't have to preach to you about giving and tithing and all of that stuff like crazy, because y'all do it. And if you do it because I preach a sermon to you, you're wrong. You ought to do it because God led you to do it. Okay? And you ought to do whatever it is that God told you to do, not a dollar more, not a dollar less than what God told you to do. So that's my thing about giving. But you're not going to hear me tell you at any point that you have the ability to tell God, I'm going to keep 100% of my resources. I think that's selfish. That you can't give nothing. See, it's ill preparation, I think, on people's part. You didn't prepare. I know what I'm supposed to do and what God's told me to give, so I prepare throughout the time to make sure things are paid so I can do that. That's the same with your time. It's the same with your talent. It's the same with your money. You will get, if you do not prepare, if you do not be a good steward of what God is doing, you will find yourself with nothing to give God. And I'm going to tell you something. When you make it to the pearly gates, and it's not going to be St. Peter. Why do we say that? Upon this rock I'm going to build my church. I mean, Peter's the gatekeeper. Good heavens, whatever. You're going to meet Jesus. Okay? You're going to meet Jesus. And you're going to say, Lord, I tried to do stuff for you, but my wife had this long list of stuff that I needed to do, and I just couldn't give you any time. And I had all these financial obligations, I couldn't give you any money. And I know you blessed me with all this talent to do X, Y, and Z, but I used it for the world and all this kind of stuff. He said, oh, it's okay. You tried your best. Come on in. Let me tell you what he said. He said to people in Matthew chapter 7, he said, on that day, they will cry out on the day we're talking about, he's preparing them for it, that bride, that whole wedding situation. He said, on that day, many will cry out to me, Lord, Lord, did we not bust our cans for you? That's Corey's version. Did we not perform miracles? Did we not cast out demons? Did we not do all of these religious things out here? And he said, depart from me, you worker of iniquity. I never knew you. They had done all of these things out there, but they were, and religious things that you would have thought that they were Christian people. Works don't get you into heaven. Doing all of those things don't. But also, you do have an obligation, though, to serve the Lord in the things that you're doing. So I'm going to say to you that for this year, as we look forward into 2025, let it be a year that we can genuinely say that we're in a constant state of preparedness for whatever God is doing for us on this earth. As we look forward to Christ's return, when you think about, am I prepared? And you ask yourself, are you saved? Are you prepared spiritually for Christ to come back? If he come back today, would you go to heaven? That's number one, the thing you need to look at to see if that's what God is doing in your life. And you need to say, am I preparing myself every day, taking up my cross and following him daily? Am I preparing for tomorrow? Are you prepared tomorrow to give a defense for the hope? Are you prepared Tuesday? Are you prepared Wednesday? If I was to walk up to some of you and say, hey, let's run up here to the store and let's just stand out there for a minute and share the gospel with people that walk up as the Lord leads. Some of you go, well, I need about a week to prepare myself. You need to prepare yourself to share the hope. Are you ready? What you're doing in church, are you, and not just in this church, but what you're doing in the world, are you giving God the necessary amount of yourself that he's requiring, or are you giving him leftovers? You don't like it when your loved ones do that to you. They just give you what you got left. You want them to give you the first. You want to give you the creme de la creme. Now, we can't always do that. Brooke, don't write this down. You can't always do that. But it doesn't work out too well if you always do the former. You're always giving people leftovers. And it won't work that way with God. He wants you to prepare. He wants you to be ready. And he wants us not to give him perfection, but to give him the best we can give him. And if you're telling me that the best, and I'm going to say this financially because I know it hits people. I'm not asking for them. The offering's already been taken up and I have no plans to take another one. If you're telling me that the best you can do is to give God zero money of your financial resources, I'll back up and say, hey, between you and God. But I can tell you this right now. He has blessed me. I gave up a full-time career. And I didn't give maybe I did give a little dollar less than I give some to the Bible ministry and all sometimes now. But I still give as if I was working. And I gained more weight. We ain't going hungry. We have not gone hungry. And I believe this, folks. I'm not telling this because I tell my premarital counseling people, when I go over their budget, and I say, hey, you got a bill on here that you need to have. You need to be given. And I tell them, give somewhere else. Don't give here. I am not begging you for your money. I never will. Don't need that. Give somewhere else. But I'm telling you, you ought to trust God with your time, your talents, and your money. You want to trust God with everything that you have. It's not just about money. But some people say, well, I don't give God my money. I give him my time. And I look at you sideways when you say that sometimes because I think you're just trying to get out. It's like when you say, I want to fast, and I'm going to fast from like cantaloupe because I don't eat cantaloupe. Sometimes it ought to be a little bit of a, you shouldn't give begrudgingly of your time, talent, and money. But you ought to give sometimes sacrificially if God has told you to do that. If it's always just easy in your time, God is not wanting you to be broke down, all that kind of, I'm not saying that. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But sometimes you ought to do something where you feel like, hey, I'm trusting God in this way. And I'm telling you, he'll never fail you when you mind him. Don't mind the preacher. Don't mind what I'm saying. Mind God and what he's telling you to do, all right? But let's have a year this year. Let's look back next January and look back and look across this place and look about what God is doing. Because I'm going to end with this, and I meant to have already done that. But I was thinking the other day, God, what are you doing? what are you doing here at United Community? We've got tentacles out in all these places. You know, we're having mission trips, long ways off, spending that money. We're supporting ministries all over the place. We're doing all of these things, mentoring, and our vans are running, our ministries are pretty well running, and I'm going, but I don't feel like we got the traction that we need. And then it hit me last week. And I already knew when I was on the phone with Linda about this, but the ladies ministry were getting together 5 families to feed for Christmas. I already told you that. And Linda called me the night before y'all were going to go do it, or the day before. It was very, very soon where y'all were going to do it. So listen, we're short families, and do you have anybody else? And I said, not really, I don't know, Linda. And then it hit me. My little mentee at Weaver. And I said, yeah, I've just uncovered some things about him, and I think we need to reach out and call him. But you know, I shouldn't have his phone number, because as a mentor, we're not supposed to go and ask these kids for their contact information. They're not supposed to have ours. That's kind of, you know, too personal about things and getting in their information. But God had worked this out to where the leader of communities and schools had told him, hey, Corey's the pastor, when he walked in, and they're having a fall festival tonight at the church. I didn't tell him all of that. The leader did. So he knew, and he come to the fall festival, and he got papers for Awana. 10 kids in the household, 8 are Awana age. They got papers. And he told me the next week, I got some papers, and I want to come to Awana. And I said, oh, really? I kind of felt a little weird. I was like, ooh, that Awana, that information's birthday, address, and it doesn't have Social Security number and blood type, but that's about it that it doesn't have. But the leader had told me, yes, I spoke to his mother, and she's willing to do all that. So I took the forms back the next week and gave them to him. And they gave us back those forms, and Brooke had already contacted his mother and got 8 of those kids signed up to come to Awana, hopefully this week, if maybe next week. And it hit me. I said, yeah, we've got their information. Brooke's got that number. I'm going to give you that number, Linda. Linda called that mother, and they were overjoyed to receive that food. They were able to pray with them in their home, then see the situation there. They're going to start coming on our van to go pick them up. So look at what God had been preparing. A mentorship program to get us in a place to be there. A fall festival to have something that's not so crazily religious for people to come to get them connected to our Awana program and what people are doing there, to come on our van, to have our ladies ministry at the right time, the right year, the right moment, and the need just happened in this family where the parents are divorcing and the father's out, and this mother's got 10 kids. And she has a good job, but 10 kids. All right. And I said, God, look at what you were doing. I couldn't see it. I couldn't orchestrate it. I wasn't trying to orchestrate. I'm sitting here going, what have you got all these things? And he's going, sit down and shut up, boy. I got it. And he showed me, and I said, oh. So, trust him. Trust him. Let's trust him this year. Let's be prepared, okay? Maybe you need a couple of canned goods or something. I'm not doing some guns. I'm not doing all of that. Be prepared in every way, but let's be ready to serve him at every moment. I'm going to ask our ushers to come forward. We're going to take communion. And as I just was saying all of this, I hope that you have prepared yourself right now. If you haven't, take some time as they're coming up and we're going to take this. Make sure that you're examining your heart, examining yourself, and that you're ready to take communion. If there's any sin that you have that's unrepentant, if there's things that are weighing down on you, spend some moments right now. Pray. Give that to God. All right?